As a disclaimer, I normally try to refrain from using bad language, but in this particular video, I apologize in advance because I will be using quite a bit of bad language. This video has to do with how Tamir Rice was never going to get justice under this particular district attorney. And I'm going to play the clip showing how basically the fix was in from the very moment that this district attorney took on the investigation of this case.
The grand jury declined to bring criminal charges against Cleveland police officers Timothy Loman and Frank Garbeck.
That was Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Tim McGinty when he made the announcement in December, no charges against the cops who killed Tamir Rice. But if you listen closely, you heard that he used the word declined. Now we find out, after a report in the Cleveland scene, that the grand jury never even took an actual vote to decide if the Cleveland police officers that shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice would be charged. Again, the Cleveland Scene Weekly reached out to the prosecutor's office to verify documentation of the grand jury's decision, but was told by the prosecutor's director of communications that the no-bill documentation doesn't exist because they didn't vote on the charges. Now, how can there be a decision made without any formal record of that decision? Joining us to figure all this out via Skype from Cleveland is one of Rice family attorneys, Walter Madison. Walter, welcome to the show. So, Walter, explain this, because this is stunning that we're finding out that the prosecutor said essentially this was an investigative grand jury. Okay, got it. But now we see that there was actually no vote. So it was as if, well, we all concluded no charges, so we can all go home.
Well, you know, it's a complete manipulation of the process. That's not the function of a grand jury in the state of Ohio, and particularly a state that patterns itself to be uniform with all other states. So what a grand jury is designed to do is not function as an exonerating body, which is exactly what this prosecutor has done. And more importantly, what he's done is he's created an additional threshold. Essentially, before you even get to the point where you can vote, you make the summary decision as to whether or not there's justifiable use of force. And that's nowhere in the law or what we would expect, in particular in a case that's viewed by millions on the internet as to exactly what happened.
So again, as we hear this, when we hear these cases, the public generally thinks that, all right, here was a case, it goes before the grand jury goes through a particular process, they either vote yay or nay when it comes to actually to indict. But what's also interesting, according to the Cleveland scene, is that not only did they not even do that, that essentially they went through this process and you have no record of even the conversation. Now, granted, it's all so secret. It is as if the DA pretty much said, all right, I'm not even going to recommend. He told us he's not going to recommend anything. But now we see that was not even a particular vote. We also understand that the cops actually gave a written statement, waived Fifth Amendment. They could have been cross-examined. They didn't even cross-examine the two cops. So what did they do?
Well, what this really does is it's a slap in the face to all reasonable-minded people of Cuyahoga County. It's a complete abuse of his authority. This really underscores the need for a special prosecutor in the first place, now B, federal intervention. There's just no explanation, I think, that satisfies any reasonable taxpayer as to how he could manipulate this grand jury. Now, all of the semantics, essentially what it is, a lot of talk about they've declined to proceed with charges, etc. You know, that's all just talk to confuse folk. The reality of it is there's nothing to decide when you've driven the case into the ground. You completely controlled every possible input, whereby they had no choice after this process was manipulated. And that's what people really fear when you have a local prosecutor involved.
Right.
And now, there's been, I guess, updates to this story, I think up to 3 now. And the story, their version, it seems to evolve with the questions. And now we have this position where people are rightful in their distrust of the system.
I want to pull in Attorney Scott Bolden, partner with Reed Smith. Scott, what do you make of this?
This is bizarre, and it's not just bizarre, it's illegal. As you know, I'm a former prosecutor. Now, let's break it down. You have an investigatory grand jury which issues a report. There's no report here. Now, or you charge the police officers and you either vote no true bill or you vote to indict. You raise your hand. You actually check, at least in New York and many jurisdictions, you check your vote. And it's all secretive, but it's filed before what we would call the grand jury judge. Walter, I'm sure in Ohio there is a presiding judge over the grand jury.
Yes, and that judge has no documentation of any of this.
None whatsoever. And so not only have they broken the rules, but this may be illegal because you can't have it both ways. You can't say I'm going to have an investigatory grand jury and not charge, or I'm going to have charges before the grand jury, put the police there. The only reason the police would give statements is if they would know and waive their Fifth Amendment right, is they would know that they weren't going to be indicted. Think about it. Why would you ever waive your Fifth Amendment on such a high-profile case or low-profile case like this? And so lots of questions.
And in fact, Sabot Chandra, who is the attorney, also a Rice family attorney, said this here, that the officers in question, by waiving their Fifth Amendment rights, they open themselves up to questioning. Thus, because the grand jury did not even cross-examine, if this wasn't investigative. So,
right.
They're saying that it was investigative, but you didn't even question them, so it wasn't investigative.
Now watch this. This is even worse. Watch this. Hold on, Walter. Watch this. Now, normally, if you charge an individual, you go and present that proceeding and give the results to the judge, and there's a defense attorney there who can challenge it or say that you should throw it out for one reason or another. Here, you really don't have that. And so what are you left with? A writ of mandamus to command the state's attorney to come before the court to confirm the results and confirm the procedures and the process, not the result or not the deliberations. But as I think about it, that's really all the recourse you have is to file a lawsuit to get that confirmation. Otherwise, as Walter said, you're just left with the results and the comments of the prosecutor, and people have moved on. Now, they filed a report later, not a report, they filed a document basically confirming what the summary decision was, but that's not good enough in a case like this. The public has a right to know beyond this, and I hope the lawyers continue to work on a better result.
Walter.
You know, what you got to understand also is that what we would hope out of a grand jury, which is probable cause, had already been determined. A judge has already declared that there's probable cause, so there would be no need for any investigatory grand jury. And then on top of that, there had been a 9-month investigation into the case. There's a pretty thorough and robust investigation, and they talked to just about anybody that had anything to say. Including eyewitnesses who claim they never heard the officer say.
This is an absolutely strange case, and this is also why many people are opposing Cuyahoga Prosecutor Tim McGinty is running for re-election. Real quick, Scott, answer this question. Even though this grand jury chose not to indict, correct me if I'm wrong, he loses, new DA gets elected, they can take this back before a grand jury.
Absolutely. It's not dispositive. It's not with prejudice, if you will. Usually there's new evidence, but surely, as you've seen, unfortunately or fortunately, in the Cosby case, new DA takes a new fresh look at it. So you could have that as an option. I think going to court, though, to get confirmation of these findings is a more immediate result.
Gotcha. All right, then. Walter Madison, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Now, I've watched this 3 times, and I am fucking outraged. Number one, this case should have had a special prosecutor right off the bat. When they didn't have a special prosecutor appointed, okay, they stalled this particular case out. If the district attorney or prosecutor's decision had been announced during the summer, there would have been rioting all over Cleveland. Absolute riots all over Cleveland. So this prosecutor timed this so that it would be the winter months, weather would be cold, and the protests would be at a minimum. Now, this prosecutor had made a decision at the very beginning of this process that he was not going to charge these guys, plain and simple. So he rigged this thing with going out and getting outside reports to confirm where he was going, okay? The reports were reviewed and found to be seriously wanting on a legal basis as well as moral basis. I just don't understand how this guy was allowed to remain in office. He has clearly overstepped his bounds, and according to one of the guests on this show, may have actually committed a crime. For this case not to have gone forward, especially after they sought a judge in the Cuyahoga County court system who found that there was sufficient evidence to go forward with the prosecution, and for this prosecutor to turn around and to basically spit in the judge's face, spit in the family's face, and actually spit in our faces. I can't see how any person, especially in the black community, doesn't feel like they got shitted on by this guy. And to be honest with you, if you really just take an even keel look at this, I don't care what race you are, this guy is basically spit in everybody's face. So I'm hoping that this guy loses in his run for re-election, which I'm assuming is going to come up within the next 8 to 9 months. I'm not sure when his re-election comes up. But when he loses, and if he doesn't lose, there's no God in heaven, that the new prosecutor comes in, reopens his case, and charges those guys. Because the fix was in. This guy allowed the two officers to testify. They waived their Fifth Amendment rights. There is no cross-examination of anything. The witnesses all are testifying against them. The videos are basically all testifying against them. And yet this prosecutor, on his own, decides that he's not going to prosecute, and then tries to clothe himself in a grand jury proceeding that was a gigantic waste of time, since there was no vote by the grand jury to true bill or no bill these two officers. You wonder why we as a people, and I mean we as a black people, don't just revolt against this whole thing, because this is a prime example. It doesn't get any clearer than this, that the system is rigged against us, that we basically have no value when it comes to the justice system. Anytime there's a situation, we are given no benefit of the doubt, no innocent until proven guilty. Just, if something happens to us, fine. If we do something, throw the book at them and call it a day. I am never going to let this thing go. Anytime there's any news about this particular case, I am going to hopefully be Johnny on the spot and do a video to let people know exactly how racist and biased this system is.